Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today I am cheating. I am sort of on a weird schedule with work, and it means that I'm not really getting as much reading done as I really should. I could, but I get kind of distracted by other things that I feel like reading, and they're not actually books, they're internet stuff that isn't books. So, what we're going to talk about this week is a short story written by Margaret Frazer of Dame Frevisse, which has been published as an individual ebook. So we're going to call it a book even though it's a short story. Ostensibly you could, of course, publish a short story as a book. It's just it would be an extremely short book. Anyways, so The Witch's Tale. This is, I actually wound up reading this at this point because I was misguided by orderofbooks.com, I believe is the website, because I go there for when I'm doing series and want to read them in proper order of publication and what have you. And this was claimed to have been published in 2010. Well, no, it wasn't published in 2010. This is a 1993 short story that got republished out instead of whatever magazine or what have you that it was initially published in. This was published as an ebook in 2010. But this is all the way back at the beginning of the Dame Frevisse series. Why do we know this? Because this book has Master Montfort. Now, you may not remember Master Montfort. It's been a while since he was murdered. But Master Montfort was the crowner in the first couple of Dame Frevisse books, the one who's not very smart, the one who saw that one man's belt and one man's hood had been left beside a dead body, and assumed that the fact that an incredibly expensive belt was left beside a man's dead body, a man who had not been, say, strangled with that belt, but, apparently he had just decided he was going to let his pants fall down and left his belt behind. I don't know. He decided, though, that meant that, clearly, these two men had, murdered this guy because belt and hood. And Frevisse was, of course, not very impressed with this and, gets the men out of that. But Montfort, his character in these books is somebody who is determined to find the fastest, most efficient, and most likely to make him some money way to resolve murders, because his job as crowner is such that he gets a percentage of whatever stuff the murderer owns. So, whatever he wants things to be resolved as quickly as possible, of course, because dealing with murders is an ugly business, and he doesn't want to deal with it any longer than he has to, and of course, he would prefer it if the murderer was somebody wealthy so that he could, get more money out of it. Justice and truth are not particularly powerful concerns of his, something that offends Frevisse quite deeply. Anyway, so in this is a very short story. The woman who is the main character, who is the other protagonist, the other point of view in this book, is a woman who, she sort of, apparently, because I trust Margaret Frazer to have done her research, apparently witchcraft was not considered to be wholly a thing of pure undiluted evil. This may have become an artifact of later years and the Inquisition and the Malleus Maleficarum, but at the time that these books are taking place, a woman could be known as sort of a village hedge witch, and, she would be saying spells as she also doled out whatever herbs and things she used to take care of people, and they assumed that her witchcraft, as much as the herbs, were doing the work, even if it was pretty much just, the herbs and whatever she knew about doctoring people. But anyway, so this woman, her husband is an abusive jerk, and he has a tendency to beat her, and this time he comes home early, surprising her, and he's very angry because she doesn't have supper on the table when he gets home, so of course he's threatening to beat her, and she threatens that she's going to cast a spell at him, and apparently tries to cast a spell, and he falls down dead. And she assumes that it was her fault and confesses, I cast a spell and then he fell over dead. Well, Frevisse and Dame Claire are less convinced of this, and indeed Dame Claire says quite clearly that Margery's husband is exactly the sort of person you expect to fall over dead from an apoplexy, because that's a thing, apoplexies are kind of, strokes, heart attacks, stuff like that. And people who get themselves really worked up and really upset can work themselves into giving themselves heart attacks and strokes and things. There are a lot of medical conditions across the centuries that, have sort of kind of outward visual similarities, and so they kind of all get lumped into one thing, like consumption. The Victorian age, consumption was kind of a catch-all for wasting type illnesses that kind of just people get sicker and sicker and eventually die, but don't really have any name for any certainty of what it is. It's a very catch-all term. And I suspect apoplexy was in its way also very much a catch-all term for, like I said, things like strokes and heart attacks. But anyways, so, Dame Frevisse and Dame Claire try to talk Montfort, who has showed up, and they try to say, it was coincidence, okay, whatever, she shouted stuff, but she said herself that she hadn't properly prepared the spell. She hadn't, because we're talking about a time and place when people believe in magic, and they're saying, she hadn't even finished preparing, she didn't have all the things, the spell couldn't possibly have worked, and Montfort doesn't care because he has a confession. And then there's this wonderful moment where he asks her what spell, and she explains what it is, and he just sort of recites it, pointing around, and his secretary is just sitting there like, dude, are you seriously reciting the spell that you think murdered a guy, and just, saying it? It's a little bit like if you're, somebody in Harry Potter flinging a wand around and shouting Avada Kedavra and, just saying it, which, sure, you have to mean it in Harry Potter, but it's also not a thing that you say. Anyways, but it's delightful in this, watching Frevisse deal with Master Montfort's absolute refusal to consider justice or facts or anything. He's got a confession, and that's good enough for him. He doesn't care. Of course, at the end of all of this, Margery's friends all, they say, sure, we'll sit guard on the witch and keep her from getting away, and then the next morning they look at Montfort with big eyes and just no, she totally got away. What do you mean? We fell asleep. She cast a spell. It's great. I mean, I've already told you the whole story, so, you don't need to read it, but it's kind of super entertaining, and I highly recommend it, because even though I have spoiled everything, it's just really, really, I love watching Frevisse just be exasperated with Montfort. It's wonderful. Anyways, so that is kind of all the things. I don't have a lot to say besides it's just kind of, this is a hoot. And everything turns out great because the guy who fell down dead is an abusive jerk, and him falling down dead doesn't make me feel remotely sorry about anything. So that is all that I have to say about this really it's a short story. This is like 20 odd pages long. So that's all, and maybe I'll even be finished with the next book in the Pallisers by next week. I don't know, probably not. I'll probably be reading another Dame Frevisse short story instead, because I am just cheating over the next couple weeks. So that's all, and I will see you all next week.